Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal, welcome and adab. You are listening to Bharat FM, a one-of-its-kind, multilingual, eclectic provider of entertainment, information and news to Indian Americans. Headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio, Bharat FM airs shows out of Cincinnati, Chicago and Phoenix. We take pleasure in our ability to cater to your bhakti, chusti, sfurti, shakti and masti needs with our audio and visual shows. Check out bharatfm.com for our online program schedule and archives. I'm sure the content will definitely tickle your senses. Tune in via the 24-hour web streaming on bharatfm.com or via the Bharat FM app. More information can be procured at 513-488-5070.
This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.
Hi, welcome back. I'm so excited to be talking to you today. So, as always, a huge thank you to Sauce for Cause and Bharat FM for making this show possible. And today, I have Dr. Alpa Bajaj with me. I'm so excited to talk to you. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Exactly. I am excited to hear about your work that you've been doing, the incredible research you've done on the South Asian community. I think you have such a unique perspective because you've just been able to talk to and hear the stories of so many people. And we're kind of just getting like a 2-for-1 because we'll get to hear some about your story and also about just what your research has given you. Because this show, typically, we're talking to people one-on-one, but obviously, like I said, you have a massive sample set to just like teach us about. So yeah, I'd first like to ask like what your background is about the work you do. If you could just share a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. I have my doctorate in psychology. I went to undergrad, got my psychology degree, continued on to my master's, and then moved forward to my doctorate in marriage and family therapy. And I have a lot of clinical as well as educational experiences. So I've worked in different sectors of clinical work, including inpatient mental health, private practice, college campus centers, and different aspects of clinical work. More recently, I'm coming from an academic background as well, in teaching as well as working in an administration as an associate dean at a online psychology institution. So kind of my background, my passion is working with South Asian community, working with family dynamics, communication. And I got sparked in that when I was in grad school, and I decided to do my dissertation in that when I was going to grad school, and just enjoyed working with that population and wanted to kind of explore more. When I graduated, many years ago, there was awareness, but it wasn't as informative as it is now. So I really kind of wanted to explore more of areas of communication between family members, and see kind of what's kind of going on. I come from a South Asian background, born in India, raised here in the U.S. So I kind of could see some areas, but I wanted to kind of explore more from a research perspective, and put aside bias and be able to kind of really kind of look into it from a fine lens.
That is amazing. And it sounds like so much of the work you've done has just like built on top of your previous experiences. It sounds like, you started exploring one field and one specific area, and then you had more questions arise and you were just kind of like following where that took you. And the fact that you say that like you have to put aside your personal bias, like what is that like? I imagine that's kind of difficult or very difficult because we grow up with a set of beliefs. I assume you have South Asian parents who grew up back in India, and just how do you put that aside when you're looking into this work from an academic perspective?
Right. Good question. I mean, I looked at it from more of an exploratory lens. So what I did is an exploratory qualitative study.
Mhm.
And I basically looked at communication patterns between first generation Indian parents and
Mhm.
second generation Indian American young adults.
Mhm.
Um, and instead of inputting anything and taking bias out, I ended up doing a focus group where I investigated and listened to other college students and kind of just understanding what are their communication patterns that they had with their families. What
Mhm.
are areas that you can talk to your
Mhm.
parents about? What are kind of taboo topics? What are areas that you wish that you could talk to them about, but you can't for
Mhm.
whatever reason? And explored that. Um, so ran 3 focus groups and kind of really transcribed, their statements and pulled out themes
Mhm.
based on that, and really looked at it from that perspective rather than, obviously growing up South Asian, I have seen a lot,
Mhm.
but I really wanted to kind of hear from the community and
Yeah.
be able to kind of hear from their perspective.
Mhm.
Now, on the other side, I would have loved to do another study where I would have been able to interview the parents as well and kind of do a side by side. However, I would never have graduated, so we just put that aside.
Maybe in the future, maybe in the
Maybe,
future,
yes,
like a
right?
part 2, like a sequel to
Exactly,
Town.
exactly.
I also think it's so cool that you specifically chose communication patterns just because that's how I feel like so much, especially if you have that generational gap, that's how so much information is passed on, is either through like verbal communication or nonverbal, just like cues and like just the way your parents maybe like respond or react to personal choices that you make. And the fact that you said you pulled out themes from this instead of going off of like just maybe filling out a survey of like 1 to 10 and going off of like the numbers, the fact that was it just like open-ended questions you were asking and then people were filling out their responses? How was that like structured? Because I imagine this is hard. This is hefty work that you're doing.
Right. Well, we had a transcriber, and so someone I would ask the questions and basically be involved in that. And what happened is they would kind of ask the questions of what does communication look like? What
Mhm.
is communication in your family? Um, who do you go to when you have a problem?
Mhm.
How do you go to them?
Mhm.
Um, what does it look like in your home?
Mhm.
Uh, what areas do you want to talk to your parents about, or what areas do you know that, oh, I can't take that there.
Mhm.
But I can talk to an aunt and uncle about it, but I can't take it to my parents.
Yeah.
So things like that were asked, and then it just opened up their understanding, their dynamics. We learned about, you know, what is communication. We did touch up on verbal and nonverbal cues because,
Mhm.
in any community, verbal and nonverbal cues are very important.
Yeah.
Within our South Asian community, there were themes that came up with, a hug, like when you
Mhm.
give a parent a hug.
Yeah.
Some people in the focus groups mentioned how when they give their mother a hug, it's like a full hug and you can feel that.
Yeah.
With fathers, it's more was a pat pat, nod pat
Oh my
pat.
God. I
And
know
so
exactly what you're
that
talking
came
about.
up. Yeah. So
Mhm.
there you've got,
Like a side hug. That,
side hug, pat pat. Yes, exactly. Um, and so it was kind of exploring, like, I wonder why that is that you have that a different
Mhm.
way of, hugging your mother versus your father. What is that about? Things like that. So it was more of an exploratory study to identify themes. Um, a lot of it also depends on acculturation.
Mhm.
Um, when the family immigrated, when the parents, the first generation, immigrated here to the United States,
Mhm.
um, those things are important to know when looking into our culture, specifically South Asian culture, in
Mhm.
terms of how receptive were they to the U.S. culture when they immigrated?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, what were the reasons for their immigration?
Mhm.
There were 3 particular waves that are important to kind of consider, like, was it personal and voluntary?
Mhm.
Back around the 1800s, 1900s, that's kind of when families kind of came on their own and voluntarily came
Mhm.
through to the US. Then you had 1960s to early 70s. That's when you had around the Vietnam War, you had educated physicians, doctors, engineers coming to the United States. The third wave was the Family Reunification Act. That was where families came here to settle in the U.S. because they had family members that were already working. Those families ended up being, from the research, you could tell that they were the less educated families because they were family members of people that were working here in the U.S. So identifying what was the reason for immigration, because that kind of really can help understand what's happening in a family's dynamic and how they communicate in their family.
So it's coming here like either under duress, with free will, like that changes everything. With how like the children are raised. And if you're coming here from free will, maybe you aren't like constantly in like survival mode and you're able to like think, past Maslow's like really basic needs of just like food, clothing, shelter to like, okay, how are my children developing on like an emotional level, like having just time and energy for those conversations. That is so interesting.
Yeah, because if you think about it, if someone was forced to come to the United States, let's say from any country, they may not be willing to acculturate or assimilate here to the United States culture, where they are going to hold on to those values, their traditional values. But then they have children here in the United States, and those children, are kind of mixed in between. Actually, I can read you an excerpt from a book that really kind of sparked my interest in researching this. It's just a fun, novel. I don't even remember how I came across it, but it was just a fun novel that I had been reading or had seen. It's a book called Born Confused by Tanuja Desai Hidir. It was a 2002 version of her book. And if you looked at the title, the actual title of the book, it's a picture of a woman, Indian woman, a South Asian woman, and then on her forehead is a question mark, and then the bindi at the bottom. So it's Born Confused. So this is one of the excerpts that really kind of struck a chord where you could really hear the struggle in this character's mind, that it kind of sparked my interest to see, there's a lot there to explore and identify and really kind of help bridge communication between our generations and kind of help bridge that gap. So it was about a young girl who things that she faces while growing up here in the U.S. So it's on page 10 to 11 of the book, and it says, the author writes, "She told him I was the Indian girl. Somehow neither description rang completely true to me in terms of how I felt inside. But the thing was, I'd never really consciously thought of myself as American either. So not quite Indian, not quite American. Usually I felt more along the lines of alien. However legal, as my Jersey certificate attests to. The only times I retreated to one or the other description were when my peers didn't understand me. Then I figured it was because I was too Indian. Or when my family didn't get me, clearly because I was too American. And in India, sometimes I was too Indian in America. And yes, but in India, I was definitely not Indian enough." So it's kind of, the struggle of where I'm confused. I'm here living in the society here. I don't know where I fit in and how to kind of where my world's, how am I supposed to be in certain regards?
Yeah, I think that passage, I feel like all of us growing up felt that way, I think. I feel like the generations now, like super young Gen Z and stuff, maybe they feel a little bit more comfortable in their skin because, one, I think social media and just like the state of representation has gotten so much better. Like when I was growing up, the only thing that I saw was like Bend It Like Beckham. I think that's the one thing that we all had. And then the generation before us, maybe it was like Mississippi masala, which also
Monsoon wedding, maybe somewhere in there. Yeah.
something like that. But that is so true. And you said this was like a 2002 version of her book, and I feel like obviously that was a massively conflicting time. Everything after 2001 and what happened, I feel like changed how South Asians are viewed in this country and how comfortable we feel. And just that like feeling of being unsure and uncomfortable in your skin. And I moved to India, back to India. My parents took us back for like 2 years, 6th grade and 7th grade. First of all, middle school, already a difficult time. Just not easy anywhere in the world. But imagine being put back in India. And that's when I was like, wait, I like look like everyone, but I can't relate to anyone. And finding myself in that was difficult. So I think this book, like, or this passage perfectly encapsulates like, one, we're all going through a struggle growing up here. And simultaneously, our parents are facing this like inner storm that I feel like maybe our parents' generation and generations previously didn't have like the time or the vocabulary to like identify and express their feelings, didn't think it was like important to do so. And then you have us where we're just like, I'm confused. I wish I could talk to my parents about this. And that's pretty much where all of your work comes in, which is like, how do you do that?
And it's like, you know, sometimes depending on how you immigrated, you may not have been equipped. Like those weren't really things that might have come into your mind or thought process at that time, to where all of a sudden you're here, you're working, living, and now you have children here. And how do I, as a parent, instill my values as well as, and keep those values and culture, and deal with this whole big thing dynamic there in the middle.
And they're trying to survive themselves, like, you know, and like you said, the pressures of being a parent and like, which parts of home am I going to bring here? How is that going to like manifest itself in this environment that's kind of hostile towards it and is maybe not like the best grounds to like have these values still exist, because you're getting something conflicting at school, you're getting something conflicting at home, and it's difficult. And I think, so in your work, you've talked to like, or in your career, not even just your study, you've talked to like multiple generations of South Asians in this country. What are the changes that you've kind of been seeing? Like, where are we headed, and like, where do we come from?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think, you know, in the study that I did, you know, in looking at I looked at 18 to 25-year-olds, college age students. And so the trend ended up being more when you were around the 18, early college years, let's say, you know, the focus is more education. That was the focus that families and parents had of their children. And that was a strict focus. Education, career matters, you know, things like that. And just the stress of don't have a social life, just focus all your energy into education. As you see kind of the progression of lifespan, you'll see in the study, it was as they get older towards the 25-year age or the sophomore, junior, senior level of college, you start to, the shift changes between the dynamics in the family. The focus ends up being more, well, now you have to get married. You know, you have to focus on that. When are you going to have children? You know, the questions were coming up. And then it, you know, a little bit of the dynamics of, is there flexibility to any of that? Do I have flexibility? Do I have an understanding and an open communication to be able to talk to my parents about, I don't want to really go into that career that you're thinking that I've always had and you've had dreams of me being in. You know, some of the participants talked about, you know, knowing people that had side jobs just because they were fulfilling their parents' dream of going to educate themselves in whatever field their parents had their dream for, yet their inner dream was not fulfilled. So they would take on a side job in more of an arts, is what they were talking about, of fulfilling that dream that, okay, I need to satisfy that need for myself.
Yeah.
And then it became like, why couldn't you talk to your parents about it? What would happen?
Yeah.
You know?
And what are the answers to those questions? Because you said like in your study, you talk about, I can talk to them about this. I can't talk to them about this. Is the can't talk about list, I imagine that's much longer than the can talk to them about list. Is that
Yeah.
accurate? Okay.
There were taboo topics, um, having a different sexual orientation, telling a family member, I'm gay,
Yeah.
that there was also areas of I don't want to go into that career. I
Mhm.
don't want to marry so and so. I am actually interested in someone of another culture.
Mhm.
Those are things that came up as definitely kind of taboo topics.
Mhm.
Sex, the whole idea of sex,
Mhm.
any conversations along that was like completely taboo, off
Yeah.
topic,
Yeah.
off, you know, and the dynamic between family members, it was more, I call my mom for more emotional support and things like that when I need to talk to someone, because I'm looking at 18 to 25, so they're in college. So imagine being away from home. So calling mom, I'm mom, I want food. Mother feels fulfilled with the food. Those are some things that came up in conversations. Um, Whereas when they had conversations with their fathers, it was more, they talked about business. It was business. Is the car okay? Do you have enough money in your account?
Yeah.
The credit card. It was more, operational in that
Yeah.
regards, rather less emotion.
Yeah.
Um, and some of the participants discussed that, some of the taboo topics,
Mhm.
they felt they were able to kind of more have conversations with aunts and uncles and people that were a little bit younger in generation, like younger in age than their parents,
Mhm.
because they felt that they would relate more on their level.
Mhm. That's so funny that you mentioned that, like, with the dad, it's about, like, the car battery, like, the payments, like, things like that, and I feel like it's I have friends where they're, like, upset, like, "Why can't I talk to my parents about this? Like, why don't they understand?" And I've had, like, moments of frustration, though my parents are, like, very emotionally, like, open and things like that. I think it's about, like, figuring out what they're trying to say. It's, like, constantly, like, decoding, like, "Okay, my mom is, like, packing this much food for me. That means she loves me. That's how she expresses it." And it requires so much empathy from both sides, but I definitely feel like I'm 25, so, like, I feel like me and my friends, like, this generation feels like it requires, like, even more understanding from our side to, like, bridge that gap, which is difficult. And I think we also place a lot of expectations on ourselves to, like, show up, to, shoulder whatever dreams, burdens that our parents have. Um, have you just, like, followed people, say, in that 18 to 25 age gap and how they've been, like, navigating that when they start to, like, maybe have a long-term partner, and just, like, how that kind of manifests in those relationships, both within, like, if they have a South Asian partner and not?
hmm Yeah, I think not really necessarily following it, but I think I've seen a lot, in terms of um, where they're at and how they communicate, what needs to happen in terms of, I think it's also fulfilling each entity almost, understanding the narrative that your family is coming from, the
Yeah.
generational family, what's happening there, understanding the parents' narrative, but
Mhm.
then also understanding a child's narrative, or the second generation young adults narrative of where they're at in their life, and how do we make those paths collide and mix together a little bit.
Mhm.
Those are some things that have kind of this gray area that
Mhm.
still needs a lot of work, I think, because it's hard for families to see their children do something else,
Mhm.
parents. That wasn't something in their own thought process, what they really envisioned for their child.
Mhm.
Whereas you can see the second generation feeling like, well, I feel kind of stuck in this world that I don't really feel like I'm connected with,
Yeah.
but I'm doing it. And how do I get out, or how do I make shifts?
Mhm.
Um, and I think since the study, I mean, years ago, I think there's been so much more awareness of this in our culture,
Mhm.
and in the field of psychology. There's definitely more research out there, There's definitely a lot more with LGBTQ, all that, and, coming out. Our Indian movies and media are really kind of putting more awareness on social issues that really wasn't the case maybe decades ago.
Yeah.
So that's also kind of put more awareness there, that has helped, I think, at least put it on the table a little bit.
Yeah, and like you said, those conversations were not happening at one point. And then I think like in 2019, late 2019, there was the remake of like Ek Ladki, and that was like focused on a like gay love story between two women, and that's like huge for Bollywood to have like a mainstream house produce a movie like that. That is a massive step that I was
Right.
just, this movie, it could be better. It could be better. But like overall, I like you put the light behind it and you helped people feel seen. And last time around, I had a conversation with Miliana Singh, who is a trans activist. She has done an incredible amount of work, and she talks about her own journey of feeling so isolated, like she can't talk to anyone. And then you have this group of people, I feel like in my generation and a little bit above it, taking like the pain that they felt, taking like the isolation they felt, and channeling it into the work they do and providing spaces for like young South Asians who feel like they don't have those aunts and uncles in their family that they can talk to. And that's like, it's hard because if you're not bringing your entire self to the table, that's like also like another isolating feeling where if you feel like I'm hiding this like massive part of myself when talking to my parents. And like you kind of mentioned, for feeling stuck and like feeling like I have these expectations on me, like I said, even in my family, my parents are very like open, very like, follow your bliss, like follow what you want to do. And even in a family like that, I feel constantly so much pressure that I just put on myself. My parents aren't even putting up on me to show up, to be there all the time, and like 30 minutes away from them. And it's just, I think like I can't imagine what that would be like if you don't have, a slightly more open dynamic, and to have that like constantly be hovering over you among all the other things. And can you speak to like how that affects like mental health, quality of life?
Yeah. I mean, it's all about, you hold it within, right? And you keep ruminating with that. So it's always stuck here within and unable to kind of be communicated outwardly. There's, from the parents' perspective, it's, they're keeping it in, and they want their child to do certain things, and they say it in ways maybe that may hurt their child's feelings or be more aggressive in saying it, or completely withdrawn. That you have the other aspect as well, where I don't even want to go there. I'm not going to have those conversations.
Yeah.
For the second generation, it's more about, is it eating me up inside? How much is it affecting my daily life? Because it's a constant dialogue in everyone's mind, whether it be the parent or the child, because that dialogue, I want to say it, I don't want to say it, should I say it, should I not say it? How do I say it? When do I say it? Where do I say it? Should I have an uncle there? Should I have my brother there? That also came up where, some of the participants were mentioning that sometimes their parents communicate with them through their siblings, and instead of directly. So those are some things as well.
Brown parents are the best poets. Like suddenly it's all about metaphors. Like you could be making dinner and it's a metaphor for something completely different. Like by proxy, you're having a conversation about like deeper life issues, but like you're actually talking about like making dinner. It's wildest thing. I totally see that. And I want to ask you, when you see these differences in communication, how do young South Asian women differ from like the men? Because I have so many thoughts about like the inequalities between how like women and men, or just girls and guys, are like raised in South Asian families. Were those answers like different? Did you kind of like see it on like the axis of gender? Like was that taken into consideration?
Gender was a big piece as well as one of the themes. It was one of those things where, a second generation adolescent boy was mentioning, young adult was mentioning that, my family wants me to strict focus on education and career and focus. And then, but this is also, as they kind of evolve in their college years, it was more about you need to provide for your family. You need to have a solid career.
Yeah.
This career that you're thinking is more of a passion for you rather than an actual career. It's a hobby. It's not, something that you are going to make money and thrive off of. Versus, young, young women, it was more, my family doesn't want me to date. They don't want me. I have to be educated and I'm in school. These are college age students, so they're already in school pursuing a degree. But then as you approach the 24, 25 range, you're getting to more, oh, you need to start thinking about now having a boyfriend, now, finding someone to marry.
Yeah.
The shift has changed from academics to more, family life, and, going in that route. So yes, there were generational gender differences from that.
Yeah. And I ask that because I always have to roast the young South Asian men. I just have to. I can't stay away from it. And I just feel like, like you said, the shift for young South Asian women starts to become the family. How are you going to like be a mother? How are you going to be a partner? And there's a lot of pressure put on that. I feel like the onus is always on South Asian women in that sense. And men are allowed to like do their thing. Like, and yes, they are being pushed towards things that like, maybe they don't want to be in that certain career, but I think like will further their success, like whether it's in their career or just like other pursuits like that. And I think that always like strikes me because, you have a family, for example, who is like, you're not supposed to date, you're not supposed to do anything, you're supposed to get into college, etc. And then suddenly the shift focuses on like relationships. But like you said, that's like in a taboo conversation. Like no one talks about like, what do you expect in a partner? What can you expect in a partner? Things like that. And I feel like that doesn't necessarily set these young women up for success. And then when you have like the South Asian men, who, like you said, it's all about being a provider, excelling in your career. They don't have that emotional intelligence to connect with a partner either. And I feel like the roles just get like perpetuated unless we all like lift our heads out of the sand and we're like, wait a second, this is not working out. This is not working. But there's less of an incentive for the men to do so because, they're getting like someone to take care of them, someone to whatever, and they get to like go like make their money and excel in their careers. Can you tell them? Can you tell I'm salty? But like I just always have to bring this up.
Not too much, but just a little bit. Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing where I'm like, how do you like see us getting out of this like cycle? Like, what's it gonna take? I know that's like such a big question, but what's it gonna take?
It's a big question. I think right now what I see is a lot more awareness. I think we, a lot more awareness of issues and situations and family dynamics that are maybe not typical historically, of our culture. And, being exposed to that, seeing it in the movies, hearing it. It's one thing to watch it and identify it in the movie and see some of those things, but then when it's actually impacting your family and your home and your environment, it means something so much different, right?
Yeah.
So it's about understanding the narrative of a family member, each family member, and trying to figure out what is that common narrative in the middle that we can create together and still sustain and keep that force still together. A lot of times what happens is whether it's the young adult or the parent, no, this way or that way. Either the child says it or and then you're breaking the communication. You're breaking the dynamic. There's no generational gap. The gap is gone. It's, more of like, okay, we can choose to agree to disagree. However, the love is still there. The family still wants to be intact, but how can we bridge that together to kind of still focus and work together? It's like, someone once said that, I want to marry outside of the Indian culture. South Asian culture. I don't want to marry someone within the culture. I've seen too much of it. I don't want that in my life. Okay. So I'm going to seek and date people that are outside of my culture. So they date someone, they, are secretly dating because they don't want their families to know.
Yeah.
Get, it deeply involved into a relationship, and then it comes out and, the family is maybe not accepting of it. I think at that point, it's a lot of understanding and identifying where that came from, what it's about, and is it that bad that we think it is? It, I think it's also looking at, is it a healthy relationship?
Mm-hmm.
I think we surpass those things because it becomes more of a belief system. Like, I don't want that for my family, or I don't want to be in this relationship with another South Asian because that just doesn't fit for me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
instead of that, it's more of understanding, like, is it a healthy relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not what we all envisioned, but is it something that we can still work with?
Yeah.
And can it be accepted in the family as, what, they are someone who cares for my, young adult, or that is caring for my, having that relationship there, and kind of identifying some of those things. So I think a lot more needs to be done. I think awareness is key.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more in terms of communication and understanding, to help bridge communication gaps between generations and within generation as well.
Yeah. And what you say about like, can we shift the focus from like not like the ethnicity of this person, but to, is this a good relationship? Just having different points of measurement and different data points that aren't like, what is someone going to say about me? What is someone going to say about my family? And just shifting the focus to like, is this something healthy? Is this something that's going to be like sustainable and bring everyone happiness and meet their needs? I feel like so much of the time it just stops at like the cosmetic level. And then it becomes like parents feel like my child is an extension and more so like a reflection of my abilities and me as a person. And I think it's really hard, and I get it. Like I'm not a parent, but I assume that's really difficult to at some point be like, this person came from me, but is not mine in that sense and is their own person. And I think that is so hard. And I have a ton of empathy for that generation. But I think like if we are to like just improve as a group of people, to also again accept the members in our community who are like an LGBTQ plus community. I think to bring all those people in, this is the work that needs to be done. And like you said, awareness is like the first step to making this happen, because your work is so important. And I think looks at this from just in a with more of the art than the science of like, who are these people and like what are their stories. So I have to say like this is incredible and gives me a ton of hope. In all the work that you've done, what is a moment where you're like, wow, I feel like I see a change, I see a difference, like just a point where you just felt so hopeful and like excited about the future?
Yeah, I think it's evolved, because one, my spark with psychology started back in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I took a psychology one course in high school, fell in love with a teacher, actually, I can't say professor then, but teacher, and then jumped into psychology too. And it was very intriguing to
Mm-hmm.
understand, what is that about? Psychology is not a typical career in the South Asian community, right?
Yeah,
So, but it was something that was in the back of my head as a passion. And then in college and then grad school, and I think since the conception of when I did my research, I think it was it was definitely exploratory because there wasn't as much out there then than there is now.
mm-hmm.
And I think with social media, as well as, different groups like Sahas and everything that's out there, I think there's definitely more hope and awareness. And also, all the social change that has been happening in our world and society, even in the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
I think those things have been unfortunate, but yet fortunate in hoping to create changes and understanding to help bridge communication barriers and gaps. But
Yeah.
there is definitely a lot of work to be done,
Yeah.
um, and understanding on all levels, whatever generation we are, and whatever our beliefs are, we're entitled to our own beliefs
Mhm.
and our own narrative, but understanding how can we make, like, you are you, I am me,
Mhm.
but we can still be somehow together.
I love that. I love a good, just like rhyming, like line. That was a bar. That was a bar. That was great. And that's true because I feel like, yeah, we have to accept our individuality and know that we're coming together through choice because we care about each other. And at the end of the day, like you said a few minutes ago, or a little while ago, you were like, at the end of the day, the base emotion that's connecting us is like love and care. And to know
Yeah.
that even if choices differ, even if perspectives differ, that's what we're all uniting on. And that's why like you're choosing to continue that relationship and choosing to keep this person in your life. And you've spoken about all of your work from a place where you've like taken out the bias, taken a step back. You don't have to go into details, but has your work even somehow like impacted, maybe you're having a conversation with a family member and you catch yourself and you're like, wait, I'm literally doing a study about this. This
Mhm.
should like, inform how this conversation goes for me. Have you had those moments personally?
Yeah, and I think in just listening to the themes that came up, I could see trends,
Mhm.
even within, whether it be my college friends or my own personal life,
Mhm.
or things that's like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. Um, that's why I wanted to kind of make it more of an exploratory study.
Mhm.
Being South Asian, growing up in the US, having that mixed culture, I saw these things,
Mhm.
but it's different for me to say that I saw it and experienced it, where I wanted to explore it and kind of really hear from others' perspectives.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, you see it in your families and with friends and culture and things, and it just comes up, and you're like, oh, okay, that's the way our culture has been,
Mhm.
and understanding it. I mean, it gives a base of understanding,
Mhm.
but I think individual differences, and you really kind of have to isolate every situation.
Mhm.
It can't be all encompassing,
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to ask also, we're in like a pandemic. Everyone's had to be much closer with each other. Like, people are moving home, living with their parents. Have you seen any changes like in that like close quarter situation where you have like these young adults moving home? How has that like changed things? How has that affected the dynamic?
Okay. Yeah. Good. Great. Yeah. During this time, this last year has been incredibly difficult for
Mhm.
everyone. I mean, the COVID pandemic has been, I mean, it's a worldwide, obviously being a pandemic, but, it has touched, not everyone has been touched in one way or another.
Mhm.
Isolation has been key.
Mhm.
In our culture, South Asian culture, we tend to be very dependent and codependent of each other. So,
Mhm.
and kind of enmeshed, where we're all on top of each other,
Absolutely.
emotionally, physically, whatever
Yeah.
um, so it ends up being, there is no space
Mhm.
sometimes for that. It's interesting that you bring that up. I actually attended the South Asian Consortium conference this past weekend, and Sahas actually had a group of South Asian young high school aged students
Mhm.
talking, and I was fascinated by their just understanding of psychology and mental health and the impact of COVID and the crisis. But things that came up there were also like the stressors that they're feeling because of
Yeah.
studying for ACTs, SATs, and being at home, and dealing with everything that comes with being at home and not having that space to be a young adolescent.
Mhm.
Um, so things like that have come up, because you have different extremes, right? Where you have people that have become more isolated,
Mhm.
generations such as grandparents, great grandparents, that have to be more isolated due to the pandemic. Then you have others that are living now, whether their college campus is closed or whatnot, and they're now back home
Mhm.
and trying to acclimate to being at home now after maybe have lived on campus for a year or two. That
Mhm.
is a different dynamic.
Mhm.
You know, those type of things have really impacted. Um, so yeah, I have seen a lot of that happen in the last year or two.
Yeah, and I think when you're that close and when you have to spend that much time with your family, with whoever is in your community, whoever you are quarantining, isolating with, those conversations like have to come up and they like have to happen one way or another. They can either like blow up, which I've seen this happen, or it can be like a moment to like reflect, learn, and be like, let's try to do this a different way. And
Yeah.
I think, at least in my life, I've been really lucky that my parents are in the latter camp where they're like, let's have a conversation. Like, what is this really about? Like, I could be in a mood. And my dad's like, I'm feeling anger and aggression from you.
Oh, wow, great.
Maybe it's sadness. Maybe you're sad about something. He's like, what's going on? Let's like figure it out. And I feel really grateful that I do have that because
Absolutely.
it's been an emotional ninja blender of a time. Like I feel like everyone's emotions have been put in like a Vitamix and just like pulsed. It's rough. So having an understanding community is so key. And can you give anyone who's listening who maybe doesn't have that, just your perspective on what to do if you don't have those people in your life and how to like kind of like prioritize yourself and make sure that you're doing what you need to do as well.
I think it comes a lot with self-care and
Mhm,
self-reflection.
mhm,
Identifying what's going on with me. What
mhm,
needs are not being fulfilled right now? What
mhm,
do I need?
mhm,
Am I lonely? Okay, I'm lonely. We're in a pandemic. You know, can't meet socially with someone. What else could I do? If
mhm,
I'm not comfortable with Zoom or anything virtual like that, can I just pick up the phone and call someone? Can
mhm,
I reach out? Who is my support network when
mhm.
I need to go to someone? You know, for families that are all coming together now, and it's been a hard time this last year, and maybe things are opening up, and there's this like confusion now of can I go out? Can I not go out? Things like that. Really, I think like your father's doing, having those conversations, just let's tone it down a notch and let's have a conversation rather than an emotional conversation. Let's speak rather than kind of come down.
Mhm,
Um, and be able to kind of hear the different perspectives. Again,
mhm.
it's like your stuff, my stuff, our stuff. How
Yes.
can we make that mesh so we can have a conversation and come up with a common solution?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. And I think that's like the biggest thing I'm gonna take away from this, like your stuff, my stuff, and then our stuff. That's the big thing.
mhm.
And I think this whole year has been an exercise in learning how to self-soothe. I feel like I've just developed an inner voice that I'm constantly like talking to. And even with me, I'll be like, okay, so you're feeling this, but like let's dig a little deeper, let's get a little uncomfortable. And I feel like
Mhm.
before this year, I was super hesitant to do that. But I'm like, you're in your own head. Why be embarrassed? Like, why not take a journal out and like write what you're feeling? So now I like journal for 15 minutes
Yeah,
every morning just because I'm like, let's check in before the rest of the world comes into the picture of like, just where are you? Because that's going to inform every single interaction that you have. So that's something
absolutely.
I can make.
Self-talk, connecting with yourself,
Hmm.
self-talk, connecting with yourself, checking in with yourself, whether it
Hmm.
be throughout the day, multiple times a day. Um, just connecting with those feelings that are within and okay, is this a problem? Do I need to get any support for this?
Hmm.
What support do I need?
Yeah.
Is it a friend, a family member? Do I just need a hug? Can I just hug someone in my home? Something like that,
Yeah.
What do I need?
What do I need? And I think, this has also been a tough time for friendships. Like you said, do I just need to reach out to someone? Do I need to talk to someone? And understanding that everyone is going through it, capital T through it right now.
Mhm.
So I saw something today, and we don't have enough time to talk about this, but Instagram, self-care, self-help culture with all these little infographics and everything. But the one good one I did see today was like, a lot of times what we're going through now, if your friend isn't checking in, isn't as present, is maybe more of a reflection of what's going on with them than about you. And I think we sometimes forget that, especially when right now we are so isolated that we are all our own main character in a way that's like unheard of in any before. And it's like the gist of what I'm saying is like reach out to your friend, be like, hey, I'm not feeling so great. Can we just Zoom for a little bit? Whenever you're free, can we just hang out? And I feel like this is the time where we hopefully have developed those muscles to just like reach out and just be vulnerable and like honest about it. And hopefully some of that extends to our family as well.
Yeah. I mean, people have been so creative lately. I mean, in during the pandemic. I mean, families cooking together, buying groceries separately, cooking together, Zooms. I mean, I know there's Zoom fatigue now, but the Zoom meetings, Zoom things, things like that, just sitting outside with neighbors, just being outside and just being socially distant. So it's also added a culture of creativity in our lives, I think, that is different as well.
Yeah. And one of my last question to you is, what are you excited for when things go back to quote unquote normal, once things start opening up? What is on your personal bucket list? What are you going into as a changed woman into a post-vaccination world?
I don't know, but I need a vacation is what I'm saying. Me and a whole bunch of others, right?
Yeah.
I think a vacation would be nice, just to just everyone's seen so many different walls of their house and different nooks and crannies and changed them in different ways and things like that. I think it's time to kind of explore more and just be free. And I think I'm looking forward to that when that comes. And and being also respectful of the wonderful time that we have had with our families, because life had a nice pause. I'll admit it's been a nice pause too. So part of me wants to kind of shelter that and keep that close too,
Yeah, I'm feeling a little angsty thinking about like, oh no, like I kind of liked this, and now it's like almost maybe done-ish in like the next 6 months, hopefully. What a time for us to be alive. Truly, what a time. And also, yes, I will be taking, as you said, many a vacation. And as Drake said, I will be running out of pages in my passport if possible. Like, not touch the ground once it's enough. So really hoping for when it's safe to do all of that.
Right. Absolutely.
So yeah, I want to say thank you so much for being here today. I feel like this hour flew by. I know we were like, how are we going to fill this up? But I had so much fun talking to you. I learned so much, and I think your study is incredibly important. Where can people find you? Where can they find out more about your work? Do you have like a website? Can you plug yourself a little bit right now?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm right now practicing at Orange County Health Psychologist in Orange County in Irvine. So I am there. I teach diversity courses as well. So I am kind of I enjoy education as well as academics. So I'm kind of putting my feet in both.
Yeah, and I have learned so much. Like I said, this has been so much fun, and I'll still be salty about how South Asian men are raised, but hopefully this/the next generation is the one that changes that. We'll see. Fingers crossed. But thank you so much again, and thank you a ton to Bharat FM, Spouse for Cause, for giving us the time to speak with Dr. Bajaj and hear about her incredible work. Please go check her out at all the places that she mentioned. Google her. I am sure you will find out more information. And yeah, we will talk to you again very soon with another guest. And as always, if you need mental health services, if you need COVID help, please reach out to Sahas for Cause. They're doing a ton for the South Asian community. So if you or someone in need or someone you know who is in need needs something, please reach out. They have like very discreet services, and they're just here to help the community. So thank you so much again, Dr.
Thank
Bajaj.
you. Thank you so much.
Of course. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal, welcome and adab. You are listening to Bharat FM, a one of its kind, multilingual, eclectic provider of entertainment, information, and news to Indian Americans. Headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio, Bharat FM airs shows out of Cincinnati, Chicago, and Phoenix. We take pleasure in our ability to cater to your bhakti, chusti, sphurti, shakti, and masti needs with our audio and visual shows. Check out bharatfm.com for our online program schedule and archives. I'm sure the content will definitely tickle your senses. Tune in via the 24-hour web streaming on bharatfm.com or via the Bharat FM app. More information can be procured at 513-488-5070.
This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.